The phone buzzed before I even saw it. I wasn't looking for anything. I swear to you, I wasn't. I was just grabbing my sunglasses from the glove box of Mark's car because mine were somewhere in the house and I was already running late for work. My fingers hit something cold and flat, tucked behind the owner's manual, wrapped in an old gray sock like it was hiding from the world. A phone. Not his phone. A second whined. I stood there in the garage, engine still ticking as it cooled, and I just stared at it in my hand like it might bite me. It buzzed again. A text lit up the screen before it locked. One line, gone in 3 seconds, but long enough to burn itself into my brain. Please call me back. She's asking for you again. My throat went dry. My hand started shaking so bad I almost dropped it on the concrete floor. 16 years. 16 years married to this man, and I didn't know he had a phone hidden in a sock in his glove box. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Work phone. Prank. Something innocent. I told myself that all the way through unlocking it, because of course I tried. Of course I typed in our anniversary date first, then his mother's birthday, then our dog's name. It opened on the 4th try. Emma's birthday. Except we didn't have anyone named Emma. That's when my stomach dropped straight through the floor. There were messages going back almost 3 years. Hundreds of them. From a number saved simply as L. Nothing dramatic in the early ones. Check-ins. Everything okay today? Thank you for the money, it helped so much. She had a good day at school, wanted you to know. She. Her. Over and over. Never a name until that last message. Emma. I sat down right there on the garage step, phone in my lap, and I felt 16 years of my life rearrange themselves into a shape I didn't recognize. My name is Rachel. I'm 44 years old. And for the last several hours of that morning, I sat in a cold garage in Ohio, learning that the man I built a life with had been living another one right alongside it. I didn't confront him that night. I know that probably sounds strange. But I needed to understand what I was looking at before I let him see my face when I found out. Because the moment he saw my face, he'd know how to explain it away. Mark was good at that. 16 years of marriage teaches you exactly how smooth a person can be when they need to be. So I put the phone back. Exactly where I found it. Sock and all. And I smiled at him over dinner like my whole world hadn't just cracked down the middle. Long day? He asked, twirling pasta onto his fork like it was any other Tuesday. Something like that, I said. He had no idea. For the next 11 days, I became someone I didn't recognize. I checked that phone every chance I got. Early mornings before he woke up. The 10 minutes he spent in the shower. Once, terrifyingly, while he was right downstairs watching a game, and I stood in our bedroom closet reading messages with my heart slamming so hard I thought he'd hear it through the floor. The messages painted a picture, piece by piece, like a puzzle I didn't want finished but couldn't stop assembling. Elle was a woman. That much was clear. And Emma was a little girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old based on the way Elle talked about 2nd grade and losing a tooth and a school play where she'd forgotten her line and cried backstage. There was money involved too. References to deposits. Thank you for covering the rent again. I don't know what we'd do without you. Lines like that, over and over, until I felt sick every time I read them. On day 8, I followed him. I told him I had a dentist appointment and left work early. Instead, I sat 2 blocks from his office in my car with my sunglasses on like some pathetic movie cliché, and I waited. At 4:45, he came out. Got in his car. Drove 20 minutes across town to a part of the city we never went to together. Parked outside a small brick duplex with a chain-link fence and a bike leaned up against the porch. Pink bike. Streamers on the handlebars. A little girl ran out the front door before he even got out of his car. Daddy. The word hit me like a slap. I watched him crouch down and scoop her up like she weighed nothing, spinning her once before setting her back on her feet. A woman stood in the doorway behind her, arms crossed, watching with an expression I couldn't read from that distance. Tired. Grateful. Something complicated. I drove home in a daze. I don't even remember most of that drive. I just remember gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white, and thinking, over and over, the word daddy, the word daddy, the word daddy. That night I couldn't eat. Mark asked if I was feeling okay. I'm fine, I said. Just tired. He kissed my forehead before bed like he did every single night, 16 years of that same gentle kiss, and I lay awake beside him wondering if I even knew this man at all. I want to explain something about myself before I go further, because it matters for what comes next. Mark and I never had children. Not because we didn't want them. We tried. God, we tried for years. 3 miscarriages. 2 rounds of IVF that drained our savings and our hope in equal measure. A doctor who finally sat us down and told us gently that continuing to try might do more harm than good, to my body and to what was left of us as a couple. We grieved that loss together. Or so I thought. We built a life around the absence of children. We got 2 dogs instead. We took up woodworking together, built furniture in the garage on weekends, told ourselves this was enough. That we were enough. So you can imagine what it did to me, sitting outside that duplex, watching him scoop up a little girl who called him daddy like it was the most natural word in the world. Because it meant he had what we never got to have. Somewhere else. With someone else. And he never told me. On day 11, I finally confronted him. I didn't plan it the way it happened. I meant to be calm. I meant to lay it all out logically, the way I'd rehearsed in my head 100 times in the shower, in the car, lying awake at 3 in the morning. Instead, I threw the phone on the kitchen table so hard it skidded into his water glass, and I said, "Who is Emma?" I watched the color drain out of his face in real time. That was almost worse than anything he could have said. Because it meant there was no innocent explanation waiting to save us. It meant I was right. Rachel. Don't. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Don't say my name like that. Just answer the question. He sat down slowly, like his legs had stopped working properly. He put his head in his hands for a long moment before he looked up at me, and his eyes were wet. She's my daughter. 2 words. That's all it took to end the world as I knew it. How old is she? 7. I did the math before he even finished speaking. 7 years old meant this happened during our marriage. Not before we met. Not some ancient history he could claim ignorance about. During. While we were trying, and failing, and grieving together, he was out there somewhere creating a whole different life. How long have you known? My voice cracked on the word known. 5 years. 5 years. He'd known for 5 years and let me believe, every single day of it, that this house, this marriage, was the only life he was living. Was it an affair? I asked, even though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. No. He shook his head fast, desperate for me to believe him. God, no, Rachel, it wasn't like that. It happened before you and me knew each other, back when we were broken up that one summer, remember? Before we got married. I didn't know Laura was pregnant. She never told me. She moved away, and I never knew, and then 5 years ago she found me again because Emma got sick and she needed help with medical bills and she didn't know who else to ask. I remembered that summer. The one where we'd broken up for 11 weeks over something so small now I could barely recall it. I remembered getting back together that fall, getting engaged the following spring, feeling like fate had put us back on track. I never imagined there was a whole other person out there who existed because of those 11 weeks. So you've been sending her money, I said. For 5 years. Behind my back. I didn't know how to tell you. His voice broke. After everything we went through trying for a baby of our own, how was I supposed to sit you down and tell you I already had one? That she existed this whole time, and I just, never mentioned her? I felt something crack open in my chest, something between fury and grief, and I didn't know which one to let out first. You don't get to decide that for me, I said. You don't get to protect me from the truth by burying it in a sock in your glove box. He didn't argue with that. He just sat there, shoulders curled forward, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him look in 16 years of marriage. That night I slept in the guest room for the first time since we'd been married. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every year, every conversation about our failed pregnancies. Every night I cried into his shoulder about the child we couldn't have, while somewhere across the city, a little girl who shared his blood was calling him daddy and blowing out birthday candles he apparently attended. The next few weeks were the hardest of my life. Harder, honestly, than the miscarriages. Because at least grief over something you never got to have feels clean, in a strange way. This felt dirty. Like the ground under my whole marriage had been rotted out from underneath me for half a decade, and I'd been dancing on top of it, completely unaware. I found out more, piece by piece, whether I wanted to or not. Laura, the mother, wasn't some villain trying to destroy my life. In fact, when I finally worked up the nerve to look her up, to sit in my car outside a coffee shop and watch her through the window before I lost my courage entirely, she just looked exhausted. Ordinary. A woman doing her best. I learned, through pieces Mark eventually admitted under pressure, that Laura had been diagnosed with early-stage kidney disease 2 years earlier. That's when the messages had started ramping up. That's when "she's asking for you" stopped being about ordinary father-daughter longing and started being about something much heavier. Because kidney disease, when it progresses, sometimes needs a transplant. And transplants need donors. And donors need to be a genetic match. One night, about 3 weeks after the phone, Mark sat me down at our kitchen table with a folder of medical documents. His hands were shaking almost as badly as mine had been that first day in the garage. "Laura's kidneys are failing," he said quietly. "The doctors say she has maybe a year and a half, before she needs dialysis full-time. Longer if she gets a transplant." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because they tested me. I'm not a match." He swallowed hard. "But there's something else. If it comes to it, if Laura doesn't make it, I'm listed as Emma's father on the birth certificate. Custody would come to me." The room went very quiet. "You're telling me," I said slowly, "that this little girl might end up living in our house?" "I don't know what else to do, Rachel. She's my daughter. I can't just," his voice broke completely. "I can't just let her go into foster care because I was too much of a coward to tell my wife the truth 5 years ago." I sat there with that folder between us, 16 years of marriage, 3 lost pregnancies, 1 devastating secret, and now the very real possibility of raising another woman's dying dreams inside my own home. "I want to be honest with you about something." In that moment, sitting at that table, my first feeling wasn't compassion. It was rage. Pure, blinding rage, that after everything I'd lost, after every appointment and injection and negative pregnancy test that broke something inside me a little more each time, the universe was handing him a child. Not me. Him. And now it wanted to hand her to me too, wrapped in someone else's tragedy, expecting me to just accept it. "I need time," I told him. "I need time to think about all of this." He nodded, and for the first time in 3 weeks, he didn't try to argue or explain or apologize. He just let me have the silence I asked for. I moved in with my sister for 2 weeks. I didn't tell her everything at first, just that Mark and I were having problems. It was her, actually, my sister Denise, who finally pulled the whole truth out of me over a bottle of wine on her back porch one warm evening in late spring. She listened to the entire thing without interrupting once. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment, staring out at her yard. "Can I ask you something?" she finally said. "Go ahead. Do you still love him?" I opened my mouth to say something bitter, something about betrayal and lies and 5 wasted years of trust, but what actually came out surprised me. "Yes," I said. "God help me, yes, I still love him." "Then the question isn't whether you forgive the lie," Denise said. "The question is whether you can love the daughter that came with it." I didn't have an answer for that. Not that night. 2 weeks later, everything changed again, faster than I was ready for. Laura's condition worsened suddenly. What was supposed to be a year and a half became a matter of months, then weeks, according to the doctors. Her kidneys were failing faster than anyone anticipated, and dialysis wasn't buying her the time they'd hoped. Mark called me, his voice hollow over the phone. "She wants to meet you," he said. "Laura does. Before things get worse. She wants to talk to you." I almost said no. I almost hung up the phone and drove straight back to my sister's house and pretended none of this was happening to me. But something in me, some small stubborn thread of curiosity or courage or maybe just exhaustion with running, made me say yes. We met at a hospital, in a small family room down the hall from Laura's room, sterile and quiet except for the hum of fluorescent lights. She was thinner than she'd looked from the coffee shop window, her skin a strange gray-yellow color I recognized now from all the medical articles I'd been reading in secret for weeks. "Thank you for coming," Laura said, her voice tired but steady. "I know you have every reason not to." I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. "I'm not going to apologize for Emma existing," she continued. "I won't do that, not even now. But I am sorry for how it happened. For not telling Mark sooner. I was young and scared and I thought I could do it alone, and then years passed, and it got harder to explain the silence than it would have been to just tell the truth from the start. I understood that more than I wanted to admit. Silence has a way of compounding on itself until the truth feels impossible to say out loud. "What do you want from me?" I finally asked. Laura looked at me for a long moment, something raw and pleading in her expression that no amount of exhaustion could hide. "I want to know that when I'm gone, she'll be loved," Laura said. "Not just fed and clothed and kept safe. Loved. By someone who actually wants her there." I felt tears burn behind my eyes, and I hated how much that question cut straight through every ounce of anger I'd been holding on to for weeks. "I don't know if I can promise that," I said honestly. "I don't know this little girl. I've spent weeks resenting the fact that she exists." Laura nodded slowly, like she'd expected that answer, respected it even. "Then maybe you should meet her," she said. "Before you decide what you resent." 2 days later, I did. Mark brought Emma to a park near our house on a Saturday afternoon. I sat on a bench pretending to read a book while he pushed her on the swings, and for the first 20 minutes, I just watched from a distance, studying this small person who had upended my entire life without ever knowing my name. She had his laugh. That's the first thing I noticed. That exact same easy, unguarded laugh he did whenever something genuinely delighted him, the one I fell in love with the very first week we met. Eventually, she ran over toward the bench, breathless and pink-cheeked, and stopped short when she saw me. "Are you Daddy's friend?" she asked, tilting her head the way kids do when they're trying to work out where you fit in their world. I looked at Mark over her head. He gave me the smallest nod, like he was giving me permission to answer however I needed to. "Something like that," I said. "I'm Emma," she said, sticking out her small hand like an adult greeting a business partner, which nearly broke my heart on the spot. "I'm 7¾ "That's a very specific age," I said, shaking her hand. "The quarters matter," she said seriously. "You get more presents that way." I laughed before I could stop myself. A real laugh, surprising me as much as it surprised her. We talked for almost an hour after that. About her favorite books, about the loose tooth she was determined to pull out herself instead of letting the dentist do it, about her mother being sick and how she didn't like to talk about it because it made her stomach hurt. She said that last part so simply, so matter-of-factly, that it landed harder than if she'd cried while saying it. Driving home that night, alone in my car because I needed the space to think, I realized something had shifted in me. I still hadn't forgiven Mark. I wasn't sure I would, not completely, not for a long time. But somewhere in that hour on the park bench, my anger toward Emma had quietly, stubbornly, transformed into something else entirely. Laura passed away 6 weeks later. I was there, at the hospital, holding Mark's hand in the family waiting room when the doctor came out to tell us. Emma stayed with my sister that night, sheltered from the worst of it, though we both knew there was no sheltering her from what came next. The funeral was small. Mostly Laura's co-workers and a handful of relatives from out of state. Emma stood between Mark and me in a black dress that was slightly too big for her, gripping both of our hands so tightly her knuckles went white, and I remember looking down at our three joined hands and feeling the exact moment my life reorganized itself around a new shape. Custody transferred to Mark within a month, exactly as the paperwork had outlined. I won't pretend the following months were easy. There were nights Emma cried for her mother in ways that felt like they'd never stop, nights she screamed at me that I wasn't her mom and never would be, and God, some nights I agreed with her out loud, because it was true, and pretending otherwise felt like another lie stacked on top of all the others. There were nights Mark and I fought, really fought, about how to parent a grieving child neither one of us had been prepared for. There were nights I questioned every decision that had led me to this exact moment, sitting in a house that didn't feel entirely mine anymore, raising a daughter I never asked for. But there were other nights too. Nights Emma fell asleep on the couch against my shoulder during a movie, and I didn't move for 2 hours because I couldn't bear to wake her. Mornings she came downstairs with her hair a wild, tangled mess and demanded I braid it the way Mommy used to, and I learned, clumsy-fingered and patient, how to do exactly that. The first time she called me by name instead of you or his wife, and something in my chest cracked open in the good way instead of the bad way. It's been almost 2 years now since that morning in the garage. I won't tell you Mark and I fixed everything perfectly, because that would be a lie, and I've learned the hard way what secrets and lies cost a family. We went to counseling. A lot of counseling. Some weeks I still feel the sting of those 5 hidden years, the sock in the glove box, the version of him I thought I knew completely and never actually did. But I'll tell you this. Last week, Emma drew a family portrait for a school project. 4 stick figures under a crayon sun. Mark. Me. Emma. And our old golden retriever, Buddy, badly drawn with what I think were supposed to be floppy ears but looked more like antlers. Underneath, in her careful second-grade handwriting, she'd written one word. Family. I keep that drawing on my refrigerator now, right next to the calendar where I write down her dentist appointments and school events, the ordinary rhythms of a life I never expected but somehow, slowly, learned to want. I found a second phone hidden in my husband's car that morning, and it broke something in me I thought would never heal. But it also revealed something I never knew I needed. A daughter who calls me by name now instead of you. A family built out of wreckage, imperfect and hard won, but real. Sometimes the truth that destroys you is the same truth that ends up saving you, if you're brave enough to stay standing long enough to find out which one it's going to be.